Right. We're moving rapidly on, and I have to, before this man comes up on the stage, I have to say sincere thanks to him, because about 2 years ago, he gave me this incredible document, this data that he had produced on Billy, about every rally and every car he was virtually in. And of course, he was one of your great co-drivers, Dr. Frank O'Donoghue, ladies and gentlemen. You were a passenger on TUI 250. Have you got a microphone? You have?
I'm connected, but
that's
I've
grand.
hearing aids, and the hearing aids have packed up, so go easy.
Okay. You were a passenger in TUI 250 as well, weren't you?
TUI 250. Do you want the rest of them?
Yeah.
The Alpine,
Yeah.
the Stratos, 2 Works Escorts. One was VVX, and the other one I can't remember. And one that very few people know about, a Datsun 240Z.
Right.
We did a rally out at Kilcornan Lodge, and it's quite mountainous at the back of it. But at one point we had to go up the stage, quite up through hairpins, and he lost first, second, and third gear, so we only had fourth and fifth. And even the old Datsun engine hadn't have enough torque. And what does your man do? Up in reverse, zips up through the hairpin. And I said that Finnish Marshal is still talking about your man coming up. Do you remember that?
I do. It was an awful waste of a Sunday because that car belonged to
Withers.
Cal Withers.
Withers
of Winsford, who actually sponsored a number of drivers at the time, including Chris Slater, who got a few factory drives with Ford. But that was just a heap of. They had no shock absorbers as well. It was a disaster.
I thought it was very comfortable. But anyway, there you go. Lots of cars and great times. Great. I never fell out.
This fella here, no, you see, he just break my heart because he was a stickler for the rules. Everything had to be absolutely by the book. I mean, some people here will know what I'm talking about. Maybe you don't. But isn't that right, Frank? Everything had to be done by the book, kind of. Yeah.
Well, up to a point.
Frank, the Stratos. I mean, what a car. Yeah. That must be an amazing experience.
A great car, I would say, for smooth Italian tarmac, but not for bumpy, wet Irish Galway roads with standing water. Because the only time, I normally didn't hear from him over the intercom, but on one particularly wet, I heard him effing and blinding. Jesus, because as soon as you hit the stand, you remember, Joe could suddenly want to step out of line.
Kind of a short wheelbase in it, yeah.
Huh?
A short wheelbase, you know.
I don't know what it was, but anyway, I could hear this guy. I knew we were in trouble because wherever he went, I was going.
A big Ferrari engine in your ear.
A Ferrari engine at the back. Yeah. That's why I have hearing aids.
well, you know, I often wonder. You see, they should have got one or two Italians up to set that thing up properly because. I mean, on paper, it should have been unbeatable, and they frequently were. You had a mid-engine, where the back seat would normally be a perfect balance. Small, light car with a Ferrari engine, you know, 3 litre or something, and V6 was it? I mean, but the one we had, she won a couple of events eventually, but it was just hard work, and as Frank says, you know, it wasn't. Do you know what? Compared with the Porsche, it was actually quite easy to drive. You know, but then I had a feeling it wasn't really. It was rarely set up in the right configuration. Yeah.
I want to skip back just a few years before the Stratos. When 74, you were out in TUI 250, but that year, if you look at the records, you were in the Arctic. And you were also in the Rally San Remo, the Sherry Rally with Henry Litton.
Well, no,
that was some travel.
We're talking about 74 now, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we did the Firestone Rally in Spain at the beginning of the year. Maybe I did the Arctic Rally one year. I can't remember which one it was. Maybe it was that year. And the only thing I remember from that was, again, I drove from Mill Street up there, and no trailer, no service, nothing. And Matty Alco was the co-driver, a Finnish guy, a great fella. And his mate took 2 spare wheels again on this occasion. and got our studs fitted. And the
Arctic Rally? What was that like?
Rovaniemi. It was northern Finland. And we got there, and the then everybody had to sleep in this kind of an igloo overnight. And it was a funny thing that happened that I remember from there was there was a guy with a Ford Escort, and he'd locked his keys inside in the car. And it was like about -30, Jesus, the cold was unbearable. And there was panic anyway, and I just happened to be there. And of course, at that time, if you were a Ford man, you could open almost any Ford car with the same key. Yeah. And Jesus, well, I was an instant hero of the Plum, because can you imagine having to break a window? I mean, he was out if they had to break the window. Rally was over, because you couldn't drive in those conditions with the window open. But the funny thing I remember about that event, in our time, Frank, the sport was very much dominated by Scandinavians, Swedes and Finns, and they're hard as hell, of course. That's the first thing. And I remember coming home, and you've been driving on ice for maybe 2 or 3 days, and then there was a frosty, kind of snowy spell at home, and I was driving around at home like I was only in a wet road, because, and this is why they're so good in those conditions. They live in them. And I remember even the late Craig Breen used to be talking about that, and I said, what you should do. I think I said the same to Keith Cronin one time. If you could go up there for part of the winter even, and even when you're at home, if you could be out in a field or inside. I think Keith Cronin has gravel quarries, and his uncle Dennis, and just driving on the loose surface and try and keep your hand in all the time, which I never did myself. It was a terrible mistake, because I go across and you'd be driving his top Brits, and Jesus, the rally would be over before I get on the pace. But there were a few exceptions to that now, but generally speaking, it's like playing sport without any practice. And there was a big exception to that in 1974 that you were talking about, and that was in the Burma Rally in Scotland. And for some reason or other, see, Dan is the most decent man you'd ever meet. I don't know. And his partner Anna, she never complained, but Dan's house was the front room was the tire store, the gearboxes, and they're thrown in the other room. And it was, but we were based in Dan's place in North London, and so when it came to the Burma Rally, anyway, I'd ride over particularly early this time, and we had a big shakedown in a quarry up near Glasgow the day before the event. So much so that we bent the back axle and the Ford. And of course, Steve Mills, Steve was incredible that time. I would safely say, if something couldn't be got, Steve, if he couldn't get it, it just wasn't to be got. So somehow or other, the Ford dealers in Glasgow that time were the Wileys. You remember Jerry Birrell and Jenny Birrell, the racing driver?
Knew them very well.
Their business. And Mills somehow or other got their number, got in there, and they were closed on Saturday morning. Got a new Atlas axle out of a transit van or something, and we're up and we're ready to go down in Argyll.
You asked me to mention somebody who was so much part of the team in those days, Brendan Neville.
Sorry,
you asked me to mention somebody who was so much part of the team, Brendan Neville.
Oh, Brendan, yeah, well, that was later, no.
Right.
That was actually in the later 80s, but Brendan was an incredible guy too. But, it was, that season was, Dan really was, I'd never have done any event. I'd say Dan was what got me into the whole thing, and as I said earlier, the sky was the limit with Dan, and that's how we ended up doing that championship. And then we hit Steve Mills, 2 Limerick men, and Evan Hughes, plus the help from home, from John and the gang in Mill Street. But, Jesus, what a team. We could have taken on the world that time, actually.
Well, you were taking on Europe, anyway.
Well, we were taking on the best Brits, I suppose.
7 rounds of the European Championship. That's some ass.
Well, that was later, I think. Yeah,
79.
Yeah.
And third, you ended up third overall.
Well, no, you see, the Burma Rally, then what happened there? You see, we had a Scottish co-driver, Johnny Ayers, and with Clark well beaten, and I remember at the time, this was much later actually, I'll tell you the story before I forget it, when Ari came on the scene, in Ari Vatanen, and I said to Ari one day, I think I have the measure of Roger now, finally, and Ari said to me, I told the story down in West Cork, I think there a few years ago, and Ari was there, he took it well, but so I said, see, people don't realise what a humble guy Harry is, so I had to tell the story. So I said, I can match Roger any day, And he said, yes. He says, I know. He said, I told you so. And then I will beat you. so that's. But we were winning that rally. By about 20 seconds that night, and I think you opened the bonnet to check something. Forgot to put one of the clips in the front of the bonnet, and we headed into the longer stage. And the bonnet started lifting, and we were debating for about a mile. So we should stop, or we decided anyway if it that if it came up too high, we could kill us. So we had to stop, get out of the car, put the clip back in, but it was 15, 20 seconds gone. We lost the rally in the end by 1 second. It was pretty hard to take,
Your big win together was in Galway.
Sorry?
Your big win together as a team was in Galway in 1979. Was that the event that you went back to Dublin to do the Late Late Show or something? Tell us that story.
Well, I don't know. I'm a psychiatrist, you see. Badly needed. But anyway.
You had your work cut out?
I used to go down and do some work for the Samaritans every fortnight. And they were having a big annual fundraising day, and they were on the Late Late. And I was to go and say something about them, something nice and all the rest. So it was the 17th of February. I'll cut this short, but anyway, of course, then it was brought back to the 10th of February, which was the day they called a rally. So I said, I can't do it, I'm tied up. And I came under fierce pressure, not from the Samaritans, but from Gay Byrne and his team. You must come down, you have to do it. The whole thing is hinged around the Samaritans. So I looked at the timetable, got into Galway at 5:30, and I said, geez, I'll hop into the car and I'll get down to Dublin, go on the Late Late, and then come back. You see, so that was grand, but the rally run late because it was a controversial decision made by the organisers.
Come to that in a minute.
Which they lost, and we won at the heel of the ring. But anyway, when the rally ran late, didn't get into Galway till about 6:30, and I was still in my racing overalls, and I couldn't afford anything except the Simca 1100 at the time. So I hopped into the Simca in the racing overalls and headed for Dublin, and there was a petrol shortage on at the time, and I was watching the stations. There was no motorway in those days, and in Lochray there was a station with no queue. So I pulled in, the guy came out, and I said, fill it up, quick as you can. And I say he's still talking about the madman in the Simca 1100 and in racing overalls wanted the car filled. So I drove to Dublin, went on the Late Late, and Gay Byrne, I got in at the first ad, and Gay Byrne said, your absence was noted. And I said, geez, if you only knew I'd driven, because it was snowing all the way. Yeah. And on the way back, going up past Port Yunkela Hospital, I lost the Simca 1100, went up and got stuck on the snowbank. But in the meantime, I got out of that, but in the meantime, this protest was pending. And he started looking for me. He said, where's your man? And Tom Walsh, lying through his teeth, said, oh, he's a headache, he's gone to bed. But wasn't the TV on in the hotel room? There's full screen of me, you see. And you're like, what's he doing? Is there a Galway studio here or something? And Tom had to say, oh, well, he's actually gone to Dublin. He'd gone to Dublin in the middle of a beeping protest. So anyway, I got back in time and we finished the rally and there was a protest.
And you won it?
We won it because 6 other people did the same thing and none of them were penalised. Yeah. So.
It was a late change in the road book or something, wasn't it?
But what actually happened was I sat into the car at the start. Where's the Halda? No Halda, just the days before Brandts, for those of you who are a bit young to know what a Halda is, but there's just a pair of brackets. I said, where's the Halda? And what he said to me was, you're supposed to be a good navigator. So I put the whole route onto the half-inch maps, highlighted the whole route. That was grand. But leaving Park Ferme on the Saturday, they handed an amendment. And the amendment said, you go out and do another, you come to a fork, instead of going into Portumna, you go out, do the stage, come back to the fork, and go in and do service. So I had tucked this thing in too far down the road book. So I came to the fork, straight into Portumna, and the lad started to jack up the car, and Sammy Hamilton said, you're a bit early. And I said, Jesus Christ, I said, I forgot about him. So we went back to the fork, did the stage, got back and went through the control a second time. No penalty for that. So we were thrown out for failure to observe the official itinerary, which we did. We went wrong, but we came back and then did the route.
I said along on the short of it that somebody didn't like one or other of us, and I'm not sure which
Probably
one it was. Probably me.
I didn't have the best relationships with the Galway Motor Club.
Because as Frank says, you see, the strange thing was there was several cars did the same thing as what we did, because you said it was a bit
that was
vague.
the crunch. That's when I started to grow hard.
There was no penalty. We were the only ones that were penalised. But anyway, the horrible thing about it was just Mick and O'Connell, you see.
Yeah.
We were competing with, and it would have been great if they had won the rally, and I would love if they had won the rally. And the only reason actually we protested was it was the year we decided to do the European Championship, have a go at that in '79, and it was one of the first rounds. So
right,
we need, and I'd have let it go to hell only for that. And it was a pity. Actually, I was talking to Mick only 6 or 8 months ago. He's in good form, but sadly, Anne is no longer with us. And but they were a great crew, and. It would have been nice if they had won it. But
so there you are.
Plum, just before you finish, 2 things. I, generally speaking, had no cross words. I try not to fight with the drivers because it takes away from the job in hand. Yeah. But on one occasion in the Alpine in Galway, he said it was a heavy car, even as a fiberglass bodywork. But anyway, it's too heavy. So he said, we have to run light on juice. And I looked. The petrol gauge wasn't working, or even if it had we had no idea how much it did to the gallon. But if we ran out, who's going to get the blame be? So that he'd say to the lads, put in 2 gallons, and I'd say, 2 more. And they'd be pouring, and everything was going grand until they started the first of their gallons, and next thing, whoosh, out comes the petrol, and he made them siphon all the petrol out of the bloody car.
No, actually, the problem was it was a light car, but it only had a 1.8 engine or something, and it was grossly underpowered. So there was no point in lashing in juice. Like, just going to slow it down even more. But the great thing about it was such a well-balanced car and brilliant handling, as I say, traction and everything. But anyway, it was good fun for a year or 2.
Right. Okay. Well, Frank, thank you very much.
No problem.
And we've got.
Good luck.
A lot of people to get through.